The date is April 2nd, 1972. This is United Airlines Flight 855. It is a Boeing 727 that is currently carrying 85 passengers and 6 crew members. The flight started from New Jersey and is destined for Los Angeles, California. But along this flight path, there was a stopover in Denver, Colorado. And from here is where the airplane has recently departed. However, this flight has some unique passengers. For example, this is William Richard Coggin. He is currently a prisoner being transported to San Quentin Prison in California. To the seat next to him is a correctional officer in charge of the prisoner's transportation, Joseph Gonzalez. Shortly after takeoff, Coggin notices something rather unusual about one of the passengers. The passenger looks completely different compared to when they first boarded. Coggin had seen the passenger enter the bathroom before takeoff, and they didn't look this way before. Coggin thinks that the passenger has put on a disguise. He tries to inform the guard next to him about the suspicious activity, but Gonzalez dismisses him. The time is approximately 4:15 p.m., around 20 minutes after departing from Denver International Airport. A passenger notices a grenade in the man's hand and quickly leaves to inform the stewardess. After being informed of the situation, stewardess Diane Surdam notifies the captain. As she returns, a passenger approaches her and hands her an envelope. He informs her that the man with the grenade told him to give the stewardess this envelope and have her give it to the captain. The front of the envelope reads, "Grenade pin pulled, pistol loaded." Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Captain Jerry Hearn had decided to land near Grand Junction, Colorado. He was hoping to radio for law enforcement assistance there. Captain Hearn would then announce over the PA system that the plane was experiencing some minor mechanical problems and would land shortly. It was at this time that the captain would receive the envelope. Inside the envelope were 2 pages of instructions and demands. Some excerpts from the letter include, "We have a grenade. The pin has been pulled. We have pistols. They're loaded. We have C4 plastic explosives. It's a long way to the ground." The list of demands include changing directions to San Francisco and secure permission to land on runway 9. A fuel truck with only 2 people aboard and 6 hours of fuel. 4 parachutes with stopwatches and altimeters, and $500,000 in cash. There is also a demand for the crew to return all written and typed notes back to him. Although that was all that was written on the notes, there was still a few more objects inside the envelope. Inside was a bullet and a grenade pin. Just some extra assurance that the hijacker meant business. Captain Hearn decided to comply with the orders and radio demands to San Francisco International Airport. It was there that United Airlines officials, working alongside FBI agents, readied the ransom money and parachutes. As with other hijackings of this nature, the serial numbers on the bills were recorded. As for the parachutes, small radio trackers were hidden in the seams of the fabric. Now, this hijacking might sound familiar. For those that don't know, 5 months earlier, a similar type of hijacking had occurred by a man named Dan Cooper, or better known as D.B. Cooper, the first man to hijack a plane for ransom money and bail out mid-flight. He jumped out somewhere between Reno, Nevada and Seattle, Washington. The demands were practically identical: multiple parachutes, a sizable amount in cash, both threatened to use some explosives, and the demands were given through the use of notes. And all of it happened on the same type of aircraft, the Boeing 727. Even at the time, Cooper was famous for successfully hijacking the plane and never being found. Could this man currently hijacking Flight 855 be D.B. Cooper? Or is he simply a copycat? After deciding to change course to comply with the hijacker, Captain Hearn would need to inform the passengers of the detour. Again, without addressing the previous mechanical problem, Captain Hearn made up an excuse about bad weather and needing to divert to San Francisco. As per the instructions, Stewardess Diane returned the envelope with the items. The hijacker received the envelope and calmly returned the pin to the grenade. Throughout the flight, notes will be delivered to the captain using the stewardess as a courier. Although the exchanges were almost completely silent and discreet, an off-duty stewardess named Sandra Wilkinson almost immediately noticed the irregularity. It took her about 15 minutes to realize it was a hijacking. Sometime later, Flight 855 would eventually land at San Francisco International Airport. The airport was surrounded by sharpshooters and FBI agents, keeping their distance. As per the demands, the 4 parachutes and suitcases containing $500,000 were left about 100 feet from the plane. Meanwhile, the plane was refueled to fly 6 more hours. Prisoner Coggin and another passenger were given the duty to go outside and retrieve the parachutes and briefcases. Alongside with these items, the hijacker's personal luggage was also brought on board. At this time, the passengers on board were getting restless. It had been approximately 3 hours since they had landed. But that was when the hijacker sent a handwritten note to the captain. It told them to get everyone off the plane except the crew. Everybody off now except the stewardesses. They stay put. Get the hell off the ground. Be quick about it. Use this runway. The captain radioed in the note and made the announcement to the passengers. Shortly after, all the passengers were released from the plane as well. Along with them, one of the stewardesses was allowed to leave. Once outside, Correctional Officer Gonzalez resumes escorting prisoner Coggin back into custody. As for the off-duty stewardess, her picture would be front and center of the newspaper the very next day. However, in the rush to disembark all the passengers, the hijacker forgot to retrieve the note from Stewardess Surdom. After the plane left the airport, it headed back to Nevada. Previously, when D.B. Cooper jumped from the aircraft, the pilot was uncertain about the exact time of the jump. This significantly enlarged the scope of search for Cooper. One of the updates to the Boeing 727 was a peephole to the cabin for the pilots to monitor the situation. This, of course, was known to this particular hijacker, and was subsequently covered. However, the door didn't close correctly and made a gap in the door jamb that allowed the crew members to observe the hijacker. The captain then began to maneuver the plane over certain towns in Nevada and Utah, all directed by the hijacker through the use of typed FAA flight forms. During this time, all the crew members were told to stay in the cockpit. When the hijacker needed the stewardess, he would simply press the call button and give Stewardess Surdom an FAA flight form or a handwritten note. While the plane was over Tonopah, a light in the cockpit indicated that the aft stairs had been lowered. Captain Hearn radioed in the information, thinking that the hijacker had jumped. However, FBI agents on the ground decided to wait. None of the chutes with beacons had been deployed yet. They had limited manpower and had to make sure that they could surround him before he could escape. They had a chase plane following, but it was forced to stay very far back to remain out of sight. And that's because one of the notes had read, "I know you have chase planes following. If I see any, I'll detonate explosives after I bail out." Then they had a hit. One of the tracked parachutes was dropped near Wilson Creek, Nevada. And in case anybody was wondering why not give the hijacker fake parachutes, the FBI was concerned that he was planning on throwing members of the crew out with the parachutes and piloting the plane himself. Not out of the realm of possibility considering the fact that the hijacker seems very familiar with airplanes. The rest of the track chutes were dropped off one by one over various towns in the area. The hijacker on board was aware of the trackers on the parachutes given to him. That's why he brought his own parachute and had it brought to him. The 4 parachutes that he was given would simply be distractions for the authorities. As for the current flight path, it's headed east towards Hanksville, Utah. At approximately 10:40 p.m., while flying over Marysville, the flight would change course to Fairfield, Utah. After reaching Fairfield, the course would change again to Grand Junction, Colorado, through the town of Price, Utah. It was here that the hijacker changed into a jumpsuit, equipped a black helmet, and attached a 40-pound duffel bag of cash to himself. The lights inside the cabin were also turned off to help the hijacker see the ground better before the jump. This also prevented the crew from observing the hijacker further. While flying near Provo, Utah, Captain Hearn felt a surge in the plane's handling. Stewardess Surdom left the cockpit and checked the cabin. She would return and inform the captain that the hijacker wasn't aboard. A few minutes later, Captain Hearn would radio the FBI agents. The hijacker, gentlemen, is no longer aboard Flight 855. The FBI began working with local law enforcement to create a net to capture the hijacker. The search area became the areas around Provo and Springville, Utah. The hunt has just begun. The area of the search is roughly 40 square miles, searching from the edge of Utah Lake to the east of Springville. Immediately, the highways around the areas were blockaded, and the search for the hijacker went underway. Hours passed, and they kept looking. All night, the search continued, but nothing could be found. Even as the morning arrived, the officials continued the search. Yet, like D.B. Cooper 5 months prior, this hijacker had vanished. After the plane landed in Salt Lake Airport, the crew was immediately questioned by officials. Unfortunately, they would be of very little help due to the limited interactions they had with the hijacker. However, Stewardess Surdom would give them the note she kept from the hijacker. In the meantime, the plane was searched thoroughly for any evidence that the hijacker might have left behind. Before the plane landed, the only thing the FBI had to go on was a name that was signed in when the hijacker bought the ticket: J. Johnson. Investigators searched for any clues to the hijacker's identity. What they found was a flight magazine where the hijacker had been sitting. This magazine had a fingerprint on it, but they still didn't have any suspects to match it to. However, the next day, a tip would come out of the blue. Utah Highway Patrolman Robert Van Lepren informed the FBI that his best friend, Richard Floyd McCoy, had told him something strange 3 weeks ago. Allegedly, McCoy had told him it would be possible to hijack a plane if someone was carrying their own chute and throw out the bug chutes that were provided by the airlines. That would throw the searchers off the track. Lepren also claimed that McCoy made suggestions on what D.B. Cooper could have done better during the hijacking. This prompted FBI agents to look into his background. They found that the 28-year-old McCoy was a Provo resident with quite the service history. 2 tours in Vietnam as a Green Beret, a distinguished career with several medals to go with it. Taking into consideration his prior service in Vietnam, as well as being a helicopter pilot, it would be possible that McCoy would have access to FAA flight forms, a pistol, and a grenade. FBI agents questioned McCoy's friends and neighbors, and quickly found a motive. McCoy wasn't exactly making much money. His only source of income was $243 from a GI Bill. That was supposed to be enough to support himself, his wife, and 2 kids. His sister-in-law also lived with him, but worked as a waitress at a local restaurant. He was also attending BYU and was majoring in law enforcement. To help make ends meet, McCoy was also a part-time vacuum salesman and repairman, though I personally don't think McCoy's experience as a Green Beret in Vietnam transitioned that well to this line of work. Also, after further investigation, it was known that McCoy was a regular skydiver at the local skydiving club. This would mean that he would have more knowledge about parachutes than just the simple military-grade ones that had less maneuverability and control. As for his whereabouts, McCoy was currently on duty for the National Guard. In fact, he was helping in the search for the hijacker. FBI agents recalled McCoy from National Guard duty. The goal was to get McCoy's handwriting and to compare it to the note they already possessed. Everybody off and out except the stewardess. They stay put. Get the hell off the ground. Be quick about it. Use this runway. However, besides the note, they really didn't have any evidence to keep McCoy, so they let him go. As for the sample they just took, that was immediately sent to the crime lab to have it compared. Although the hijacker had been seen by many people, including the crew and the passengers, he had already been wearing a disguise, so this made it difficult to find anybody that could identify him as the hijacker. Plus, he would have communicated almost exclusively through the use of notes, so recognizing his voice would be difficult as well. However, there was one person that could identify him. Someone that had seen the hijacker before he had put on the disguise. And that was prisoner Coggin. As for why Coggin was able to notice someone suspicious on a plane full of passengers, I guess you can say they know their own. Coggin would positively identify McCoy as a hijacker he had seen without the disguise. Afterwards, news from the handwriting experts would arrive. They concluded that the handwriting sample was the same as the note that had been taken. Around the same time, the fingerprint results from the magazine would come back as well, the one that had been taken from the airplane. It had been matched up against a print that McCoy had on file while in the military. The results came back as a match. This was enough to get an arrest warrant for McCoy and search his residence. On April 9th, 1972, at 5:37 a.m., McCoy would be arrested outside his home in Provo, Utah, just as he was about to leave for National Guard duty. After searching McCoy's home in Provo, investigators found typewriters, parachutes, guns, a grenade with the powder removed, and most importantly, $499,970. Richard Floyd McCoy would be charged with 1 count of air piracy, the max sentence for the crime being the death penalty. The prosecution's evidence was fairly solid. First was the handwriting on the note. According to handwriting experts, McCoy's handwriting matched the hijacker's perfectly. In case anyone is asking, why didn't McCoy try to alter his handwriting or something? Well, that's a good question. I personally think it was because he forgot. I think McCoy simply forgot that he had left a note behind and thought the only piece of handwriting they had was his signature from signing in. But that's just my personal thoughts. Only McCoy knows that reason for sure. Also presented was the eyewitness testimony of the prisoner. Coggin had seen McCoy and could point him out in a picture, though he was not the only one. After McCoy landed, he had bought a drink and paid a kid $5 to drive him into town. Both the waitress and the boy were able to identify that McCoy had been there that night. This positively placed him in the area and not at his home as he had tried to claim earlier. Next was the fingerprint brought in from the airplane. It conclusively matched McCoy's and proved that he was on flight 855 that night. Besides that was his sister-in-law's testimony. She had been living in his house at the time. Allegedly, McCoy had tried to get her to help him with the hijacking. However, she had refused. And when he hadn't returned during the night of the hijacking, she had called his friend, Highway Patrolman Van Leperen. She had asked if McCoy was on a mission because McCoy wasn't home and she was scared to death. This is what prompted Van Leperen to contact the FBI and give them the lead about his best friend. However, the most incriminating evidence brought against McCoy was the $499,970 found inside his house. These bills matched the serial numbers recorded by FBI agents in San Francisco. It was the final nail in the coffin for the hijacker. The jury would only need 90 minutes to reach a verdict. McCoy would be found guilty and be sentenced to 45 years in prison. So that's the end of the hijacking, and normally I like to leave my stories there, but I think I should finish it, because it does get quite interesting afterwards. You see, McCoy's hijacking career might have come to an end, but he was determined not to spend the rest of his life in prison. This is the United States Penitentiary in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. McCoy had been spending his time in the prison looking for a way out. During his stay, McCoy was used to work at the dental lab inside the prison. Here he had access to dental plaster that is used for crowns and implants. McCoy was able to use some of this plaster and, over time, mold it into the shape of a pistol, then paint it black. Also, he wasn't alone. He had made a group of friends. This group included Melvin Dale Walker, Joseph Haver, and Larry Bagley. And on August 10, 1974, they would make their move. McCoy and the other convicts would rush a garbage truck that they had been keeping an eye on. The garbage truck only had one driver and only one guard to protect it. After quickly subduing the driver and the guard, they would make their escape. The front of the prison is enclosed by a metal gate. Their solution? Run right through it. The fence flipped over and on top of the truck. Guards from the tower started firing on the runaway truck, but the bullets only bounced off the metal sides. And after going through another set of gates, the fence slid off the end and wedged itself stuck into the opening after the truck passed through. The guards quickly began the pursuit. However, they couldn't follow immediately due to the fence blocking the entrance. This gave McCoy and his accomplices precious time to gain distance on their pursuers. About 15 miles west of the prison, in Forest Hills, the escapees would abandon their vehicle in a wooded area. There they tied up a man and his wife and stole their vehicle outside their home. And with this vehicle, they would disappear from authorities. However, in order to stay on the run, the convicts would need money, so they did what criminals do best. McCoy may have been a Mormon Sunday school teacher and soldier when he was free, but now he was excommunicated, a known hijacker, and an escaped convict. August 13th, 1974, inside the Bank of North Carolina in Pollockville. 3 men come in armed with guns and masks. They incapacitate the guard first and make demands for the teller to hand over the money. The teller complied. The robbers seem to be very experienced with this sort of thing. It's not really surprising since Melvin Walker had robbed multiple banks with his brother back in the day before being arrested. Before exiting, the 3 would force the staff inside the bank vault. Then our 3 convicts would join up with the 4th convict who was driving the getaway car. The amount they made off with? $16,000. However, the getaway car would be spotted in a sparsely settled area near Cove City, North Carolina. 4 individuals were then seen by a law enforcement helicopter trying to cover their vehicle. Shots were fired. However, the area was quickly filled by officers, and the 4 individuals ran. 2 of them would be captured, Joseph Haver and Larry Bagley. As for McCoy and Walker, they disappeared again. September 4th, 1974. McCoy and Walker would once again rob another bank. It would be the Bank of Maryville in Maryville, Tennessee. This time, they would make off with $76,000 and steal a person's car in the getaway. November 7th, 1974. FBI agents in Charlotte get a tip that 2 males matching the description of the escaped convicts are living in a house in the area of Virginia Beach, Virginia. All FBI agents know at the time is that a man under the name of Herbert Moon had recently started renting this house. FBI agents set up surveillance and watched the house for 2 days. On the second night, FBI agents enter and find a large amount of weapons throughout the house. They set up into positions and wait. At approximately 11:15 p.m., McCoy entered the front door of the residence. He was advised to surrender. McCoy fired at the FBI agents and was killed by the return fire. Walker was captured about a half-mile away from the residence after a high-speed chase. And with his arrest, all the escapees were accounted for. And with his death, that's the end of Richard McCoy's story. However, there are still questions that haven't been answered. What was McCoy's connection to the unsolved D.B. Cooper case? While the FBI was investigating McCoy, they had tried to link the 2 hijackings. On the surface, there are many similarities. Both had worn a disguise, both sat in roughly the same spot, both made threats with the use of explosives, both used FAA flight forms to control the flight path of the plane, both demanded 4 parachutes and a large amount of money, both used a fake name when purchasing the tickets. The list kind of goes on, but this is kind of to be expected. Keep in mind, D.B. Cooper's hijacking was very famous. You might even call it inspirational, as in inspirational enough to have copycats. In fact, McCoy's hijacking was the 5th hijacking of this nature within 5 months of D.B. Cooper's original hijacking. And even after McCoy's capture, there would be many more hijacking attempts like his. Over a dozen of these copycat hijackings would occur until a new safety feature was installed into the Boeing 727, the Cooper vane. Basically a mechanism that didn't allow the aft staircase to open while the plane was in the air. The FBI's formal stance on D.B. Cooper is that he died during the jump, because it was a jump at night, in bad weather, with low visibility, and he wasn't wearing the correct footwear or clothing. And the chute Cooper jumped with was a simpler, unsteerable parachute. That and the fact that no money from Cooper's ransom ever reached circulation. This normally convinces most people that Cooper made his very last jump that night. But who knows? They could be wrong. But in case you're wondering, while being interrogated, McCoy never admitted to being Cooper, but he never denied it either. So make of that what you will. Okay, so thanks for watching. This one took me longer than I thought, but I hope you enjoyed it. We're almost at 30 subscribers, so don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm trying to get a little faster with my uploads, but some of this stuff takes a little more time to put together. But I think I got the hang of it now. I'll be back as soon as I find something else that's interesting. If you have any suggestions, just let me know. I'm thinking maybe doing a bank robbery story next. I'm not sure. I haven't decided yet. Until next time. Later.